Hello and welcome. This is the Cole Memo. I am your host, Cole Preston. Every episode is released in audio, video, and transcript format. To find the transcript, audio, or video version of any episode, please refer to the description of the episode that you're listening to now. Within that description, you can find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. If you're unable to locate the episode description on whichever platform you're listening from, simply note the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. From there, you can find the corresponding episode, and then you'll be able to access the audio, video, and transcript version. You might also find any links that we reference during the episode so that you might be able to do your own research. Folks, if you go to thecolememo.com and use the search functionality in the top right-hand corner, that's a super easy way to find an episode if you're struggling finding one. For example, if you're looking for episode 50, go into the search functionality at thecolememo.com and search 50, and it should pull up episode 50 because our search functionality works great. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, then you're listening to this episode later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. It's a great way to support our show. Another way to support our show is by going to thecolememo.com/support. You can make a one-time, monthly, or yearly contribution of your choice. That's right, a contribution of your choice. You can donate $1 once, or you can donate $1 monthly, which will be $12 a month. All of your support is appreciated. If you're not able to support me financially, that is okay. One of the best ways to support our show is absolutely free. Just subscribe to our show or follow it on social media. Leave us a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, or post a review. Your engagement and support is appreciated. Enjoy this episode of the Cole Memo. It's February 21st, 2024, and today I'll be joined by my friend Philip and the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. Hey, Phil, thanks for sitting back down. How's it going, dude?
Great. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us, and joining us once again is Chris Berry from the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. Chris, go ahead and reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, Cole. Hey, Phil. Yeah, great to be back with you guys. My name is Chris Berry. I'm the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. We're an agricultural organization in Illinois, and we've been working in the hemp space for over 5 years now. And we're super excited to be here and talk about the new rules that are coming down the pipe from IDOA and plenty of other stuff too.
Yeah, and I'll give you the space on the other things before we get into everything we want to talk about. I'm displaying for our listener or for the people that are watching the podcast right now. If you'd like to watch the podcast, go to colememo.com/YouTube. Um, I'm displaying a graphic right now for an upcoming event that you have. Tell us about it.
All right. So this is the second year that we're doing sort of it's like an after party. The Illinois Department of Ag has their own annual hemp summit where they have a variety of presenters. This year it's more academic and research focused from what we've seen. But it's usually like an early event during the day, and it wraps up in the early afternoon. So after it's over, we have our um, after party, and it's going to be at a place called Anvil and Forge, which is a great wide open space with wood fired pizza and beer and all. It's just a great place to just hang out and sort of discuss uh, all the events of the day and sort of unwind and have our happy hour out there. This is the second year in a row that we're doing an after party after the event. And yeah, it would be great if anyone who's interested in hemp, and you can make it down to Springfield, please come to the IDOA event, and then please join us for the after party at Anvil and Forge if you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said you had maybe something else to mention before we talk rules.
Yeah, so we will be planning. Uh, we'll be providing more details for an event in May, which is going to be a hemp lobby day. So if you're interested in getting down into Springfield and making your voice heard and just supporting the hemp industry and supporting farmers. This is the opportunity to get in front of some legislators, get into their offices, get into their speak to them, speak to their assistants, give them handouts, do just communicate the message that you're interested in hemp and that you want to be a participant. And right now, I think that it's really important to do that, and that's why the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, we're pushing for a little bit more, I guess you would say, recognition from our legislators, because right now there's not a whole lot of interest from legislators in hemp, and it's not just on the state level; it's the federal level. But that's one of our initiatives. Is just May is a great time to do it. April and May are like the best 2 months to lobby in Springfield. So we imagine that it will probably be on a Wednesday in May, which I know is difficult for a lot of people to get away in the middle of the week, but that is actually the perfect day to get in front of legislators' faces. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us and let us know that you're interested in that, and we will organize a group outing to go do this thing, because that's how we got started, was lobbying in Springfield over 5 years ago, and it's just an incredible experience, and it's an incredible springboard for you to be more aware of how you can affect public policy and how your story actually really does affect the way politicians conduct themselves on the floor in Congress.
Yes, yes. Join the movement, folks. And if you want to make sure that you're in the loop on what they're doing, it's illinoishga.com. Is that right?
That's right.
Bam, got it. And that'll be in the podcast description, folks. You can sign up for their email newsletter. If you saw the last one, you may have seen a familiar face, Grace, the newsletter at the very bottom, and so much more helpful information. And some of the information that we'll be discussing today. I think that's a perfect transition. Look at that. Look at that. The latest hemp program rules were published in the Illinois Register the day after Christmas. Hey, Christmas came late this year. Um, Chris, tell us about this. What's the word on the street? Break it down.
All right. So it's it's been it's not been a surprise. It's been more of I guess well, it's about time. It was almost a year, well, 9 months since the public comments were submitted, and I know we've talked about this prior on other episodes.
Yeah.
And so it's been a long time since they proposed a rule change, and now finally in December they finally got their whole act together, and they put out a final version to be submitted to the USDA of the hemp program rules for Illinois. That
Uh,
being said, after 9 months, what was published in the Illinois Register, and this is just to give everyone some context that before we start talking about the details, what was published in the Illinois Register, and this is, I don't, if you have any experience looking at the Illinois Register, they will show the previous version of what was said, and then they'll also show the new version, and then they'll have stuff crossed out, and they'll have like the new version will be in a different color, and so you can see what changes have been made. Um, I don't know where or how this mistake was made, but what's published, and this is officially published in the Illinois Register, like there's no taking it back. They compared the new rules that they've released to an old version of the rules that was probably from like 2020. and they had since updated the rules and post that time. So when you read the changes in the Illinois Register, it actually looks like they're overhauling the entire industrial hemp rules, and there's so many changes. But it's not. That's not really the case. And so, yeah, just to give you that context, if you do go and investigate this for yourself, you're going to see that there's a ton of changes, what looks like a ton of changes in the register, but there's really not that many changes. And most of the critical sticking points, as far as, what is the definition of hemp, what is your requirement for testing your hemp, what are the timelines, what are your responsibilities as a cultivator, all of those things are essentially going to remain the same. The biggest change with the rules, is they're officially putting it out there that you have to have the FSA, or the Farm Service Agency, involved in your hemp cultivation. So previously, it was just the Department of Ag that was handling everything from giving you the license to making sure that you have a compliant test, and also handling all of the reporting that's your responsibility, and all of those things. Now what they're saying is we need to have the FSA involved in that. So yeah, with the PDF that you have right now, Cole, if you would Control F and just type Farm Service, that would probably be the biggest change. They have made some changes. Yeah. So see, in the definitions there, they've added Farm Service Agency, FSA. That is the biggest part of this, is if you don't already have a relationship with the FSA, if and you plan to be a cultivator, now's the time to reach out to the FSA and say, because at this time of year, it's perfect. It's late February, um, and the growing season's coming up. Reach out to your FSA and say that, I want to be a hemp grower. This is my plan. What can you do for me? And let's get it on the books, because I'm going to get a hemp license, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the biggest, as from the cultivator's perspective, that's the biggest change. Is this is a whole new thing. Last year, it was like everyone should have done this, but if you didn't do it, it's okay, probably. But this year, it's like it's official. It's on the books. You got to have FSA take care of your harvest and reporting numbers. So you will be filing reports to the FSA. You will not be filing harvest reports to the IDOA. So and there, like I said, there looks like there's a lot more changes. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, with all of the blue underlined text, it's showing, like dry weight basis, decarboxylated, like all of these new definitions. Some of them are new, some of them are not new. Some of them were in there's an approved hemp plan on the Illinois Department of Ag's website, which contains some of these definitions already.
That's definitely
So
new though, right? This decarboxylated thing.
potentially, I think, regardless of whether or not that particular definition is new, the underlying concept there of the total THC, which like it accounts for the um, conversion of THCA to
Hmm.
delta 9 THC, that has been on the books for lo- much longer than prior to what this um,
Okay.
new proposal shows.
I
So they
Yeah.
may be adding the definition of decarboxylated here,
Hmm.
uh, but it's not necessarily going to change anything for producers. And another good thing to think, another good like key piece of information to think about when you're thinking about these rules here is these rules are very much geared towards cultivators. They're not necessarily geared towards processors, or there is some language in there, explaining what you need to do as a processor, but then going even further than that as a retailer, or anyone else who um, deals with hemp in their line of business. If you're on the end user side, if you're on the retailer side, not a whole lot of information and rules apply to you from this new rule. Essentially, everything that you've been doing for the last 5 years is still going to be the status quo. So like if you're someone who primarily 90% of your business is Delta 8 products, there's nothing in these rules that is going to keep you this year from participating and continuing to um, generate revenue that way. And same thing with the hemp derived Delta 9 or any of the other um, hemp cannabinoid products that some people might consider intoxicating or whatever else you might want to describe them as. Nothing in this rule change is going to shut you down, and I think that's
One,
the key. That's the key takeaway from this, like as just an overall summary, because this is what we've seen as the IHGA is we have people reaching out to us saying they're going to shut us down, and uh, time and time again, I'd say at least half a dozen times now, we've put in the work to one-on-one communicate with these businesses to address their concerns and to say this is not what's actually happening. There's a little bit of alarmism, a little bit of government's out to get me mentality, which is totally understandable. But with this specific rule change, you don't have a whole lot to worry about if you're on the end user retailer side of hemp. Just the same as you have been for the past 5 years. So what were you going to
what
say?
what about people kind of exploiting this like loophole of this like THCA flower that's been around? Because I feel like that could seemingly be something. If you're saying that like that total cannabinoid definition has already been on the books, like I know Cole has referenced, and like we've heard people talk about how they're looking to do some kind of enforcement around this stuff. Is that something that the state might be cracking down on?
So yeah, so like the THCA flower, um, if it like the only requirement, if you dig into these rules and you dig into the USDA rules, the only requirement is a compliant pre-harvest test. After the hemp material passes a compliant pre-harvest test, it can go to retail. And if you don't ever do another pre-harvest test or official pre-harvest test, because you can still find this too. You can go online or go to a retailer and scan a product. Most of the time there's a QR code. If not, you can ask them for the COA and the certificate analysis, and they'll provide you one, and it'll say this product is 17 or 20% THCA, and as a pre-harvest compliance test, that's not compliant. But if the rules for the pre-harvest compliance test happen 30 days plus or minus 5 days um, before harvest. So if you plan it out right, you get to flower for um, what is it, 7 weeks? Or no, it's 35 days. You get to continue to flower for 35 days after you potentially, like at the maximum, have a compliant test. So that those are the products that are going into retail with a compliant harvest test, but then also are showing super spiked levels of THCA.
Well, but plausibly though, like if the state really wanted to, they could like, you know, because I don't know if these are like rumors you were hearing, Cole, about the state wanting to do some kind of stings or something.
Yeah, I
You
was
know, like
actually gonna.
you could imagine them like going and buying stuff. Like a retailer could plausibly still get in trouble selling that stuff, right?
Well, so
If
this
the
is
state were to then go test it and then be like, no, this is actually like, is the testing thing that they got done pre-harvest gonna like save their ass?
Yes, yes, I
Oh, will
think
it? Okay.
yeah, technically, I think yes.
Okay.
It with with like this type of enforcement doesn't really exist. And when, like, if we do see something like this happening, then it should be well known that this is happening.
So
It
that's
as
what
of right.
I just talked to somebody this morning, and what Phil's referencing, this is an old report that I did. There's just a little part in this. I went to a fireside chat, it was called, with CBAI, and I actually went with Phil. You can see Phil and I right here. Tiffany Chapel Ingram, who approached us, she's the executive director of CBAI. You might also recognize her as a former deputy of the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office. Um, sorry, there was a part in here where they, yeah, do something. Whoops, do something. Hemp. Sorry. I had to find the part. She mentioned, so she was talking about hemp, and she said at Canra, which you've told us about in the past, Chris. I actually learned about Canra from you, I believe. Um, Aaron responded that everybody at Canra was saying that, something to the effect of hemp is the devil and everybody wants to ban it, or rather Delta 8. That was the context in which she was talking about that. Um,
Sure.
she mentioned that if the federal government closes the loophole, that, quote, 95% of our problems go away, end quote. She mentioned that right now local law enforcement is reluctant to do anything due to hemp's federal legality. And Aaron mentioned that they would be reaching out to the attorney general's office to, quote, see if there is anything they can do. And just this morning, I spoke to ACT Laboratories, uh, Dr. Bob Miller, and he mentioned to me before we went on the call that the state reached out to them in partnership with the attorney general to look into, he said, hemp. So I asked about it, and I want to play this moment. Just, I want to see what you think about it. And obviously, if you need time to, this is off the wire, right? But I'm going to play this really quick, and it's honestly, this will be my first time watching it back as well. So let's watch it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So last question, and I meant to ask it earlier. You had mentioned, possibly working, and I've heard the state mention this before, that they would be working with the AG to kind of do something about hemp. Um, was it the idea that you'd like be helping them with the hemp testing, as you said, since you do hemp testing, or what's the idea there?
I yeah, my understanding is they want to understand, and again, it's all the states are sort of, it's on their agenda about how do we regulate this, and as part of regulation, I think one of the first things is what's out there, and I think so where they're starting with is saying, okay, what are they seeing out in the marketplace, and how do we, based on those findings, how do we then put some level of tighter control with that. So, from what I'm understanding, they do want to start doing some, I'll call it surveillance, sake of a better word, surveillance testing, where they go in and buy product just to see what it looks like, much like what we did in Pennsylvania at the request of the Department of Health. It's a similar type of approach. It seems like Illinois, as are other states, are really starting to amp up this whole area just to see what's out there. And then I think, with the premise being, once they find that, like, what are we going to do to control it, regulate it? Because my expectations, it's going to be quite varied what we're going to find.
That's very, very interesting to hear. So that's kind of what I thought they were referring to. They had said, that this is a big public safety issue and that they'd like to do something. And I figured I mean, what else would you do other than, checking what's out there so that you can more authoritatively say, like, so I don't know if I'm going to check the transcript to see if he says anything else about this, but just off of that, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have several. So let's go back to that comments, the comments from the lady you were talking about the first time. She says, if we eliminate, or not, I'm sorry, if we regulate hemp or close the loophole, 95% of our problems go away. Who's our? Who are we? Who are we talking about here?
Well, I'll try to answer this question. If let's do that, yeah, so, piece by piece. So they say
Well,
it's
I
a
know exactly
consumer.
social equity and the regulators.
I was going to say it. Well, it's a mixture of social equity and what they call a consumer protection issue. And they even said that this is a quote. I don't want anybody in Illinois consuming something that was cut with by formaldehyde. And everybody in the room went, "Hmm." I don't know if you remember that, Phil. That seems like it's not safe for consumption, but I'm not a scientist. Uh,
So a
so
statement like that is basically akin to saying all because one product in the cannabis dispensary was contaminated with mold, all cannabis products are contaminated with mold. So
yeah,
like that's like just straight up fear mongering right there. And so like the I don't understand the equity component to this other than that equity people who have qualified for social equity have been promised something by the state, and the state has created a social equity component to their own uh, I guess I would say like abject failure, like total chaos. This like multi-license, multi-agency, state legal but federally not legal cannabis. Like it's a total disaster. And so, like anyone who is defending the state's right to have this insane disaster play out and continue to play out, and then to like use social equity as sort of like a bargaining chip to say that well, obviously the state regulations of cannabis need to continue because social equity is so important.
well,
It's like
Phil always
it's like a
likes to say the last person that said, "Well, hey, maybe," I think they pontificated out loud, maybe even on my podcast. I can't remember exactly, but maybe license limitations aren't a part of social equity. See, you can't say things like that because that
yeah.
is part and
So
parcel of what it is, you know?
right. So like, yeah, go out and take a poll of all social equity applicants. Ask them one question: are you happy with the current state of Illinois cannabis regulation? I think we all know the answer to that, and the 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 way that they're sort of saying like this loophole is hurting us. Hemp is legal federally, and that's what's making our enforcement hesitant to crack down on it. It's like, well, that's not going to change. Um, it is what it is. It's been that way for 5 years. For you to come out and say it's a public safety issue and it's all contaminated with formaldehyde, it's nothing more than just fear mongering politics. Like to dive into the substance, any other points that you make in your argument that this is what needs to happen, it's like it's to give you validity to an argument that is just completely superficial and invalid when it comes to federal law, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to farmers and hemp.
Yeah.
Like farmers and hemp don't care about the Illinois cannabis industry. We're a national group of people who are trying to um, establish an alternative crop, an alternative row crop, and the benefits of that, the extracts of that, all of that is part of our industry. And for your little state regulation, your little state scheme where you're shooting fish in a barrel, we don't want any part of that. We're beyond that. We're outside of that. And for
Well,
you
because
to
hemp is like what you're saying is hemp is national. Like your market is national. Like the market for Illinois hemp could be in every state.
yeah
But like the
yeah
cannabis
exactly
market, it's like just this little market in Illinois.
right,
You know,
but
so like why?
they've made a lot of
Yeah.
promises. They've collected a lot of money. They've codified a ton of laws and legal language, hundreds and hundreds of pages. Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, Cannabis Control Act. Like there's so much uh, money to be made, bureaucracy to be navigated, and all of it is self-imposed. It's something that the cura te ipsum, which means you cure yourself. You created this problem, and then you create the solution to this problem, and then you act like a hero. That's what the cannabis industry in Illinois is all about right now.
That's what I always said was the worst idea. It was like the worst person to put in charge of managing social equity in Illinois is Illinois because they made the market in the first place.
Yeah.
Like you should have just like that's the best argument for an open market is that the Illinois government should have no hand in picking who gets a cannabis license.
Just that it's as expensive as it is, and that only medical patients can do home grow. Like if it's not legal to grow, it's not legal, right?
Right.
So like hemp is the total opposite of that. It's plant as many acres as you can, experiment, learn, try to find markets, like build this new alternative crop that, oh, by the way, also happens to be really beneficial for the environment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So and you know it's all part of the new bio-based economy, and local like it'll help bolster local economies, bring manufacturing back to the United States. Like there's so many benefits that hemp brings, but we can't stop focusing on local, like state level cannabis licenses. We can't stop focusing on the fact that the state wrote checks that its ass can't cash, basically, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like we've collected an absurd amount of money and built this entire scheme around this. And now federal law is all the walls are coming crashing down, and we're trying to preserve it. Like we've got a teaspoon, and we're bailing water out of a sinking ship.
Yeah. I wanted to just more clearly vocalize. I mean, you kind of said it yourself, but if I could just read a quote, and we've pretty much addressed this, but Aaron Johnson, again, our cannabis regulation oversight officer, expressed that these products either go untaxed or are only subject to retail level taxation, making them more affordable than cannabis. This harms our social equity licensees. And she's expressed a similar viewpoint in the past. She was quoted in Crane's Chicago Business as saying, "We have to move forward to regulating intoxicating hemp, which is a direct competitor to our social equity licensees. I do think the legislature has the appetite to regulate intoxicating hemp."
Who else
Well,
has
to be
heard this?
fair, she is angling for a future job in the industry. So
What were you saying, Chris?
That's good to know, Phil. A good point.
no,
I mean,
I'm just
it's not.
kidding.
Oh, I was gonna say that's not a surprise to me at all.
No, that's just Illinois. That's just how that
I
goes.
mean, I did just mention that the former CROO deputy is now the head of the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. So, I mean,
And
it's
I
not
believe Pam Eltoff's
outside of the
plans
realm.
weren't Pam Eltoff's plans to go work in the cannabis industry somehow.
I think she hinted or alluded to it when she was on my podcast, but it was unclear. So I don't want to, she left it kind of unclear.
It was more a threat than anything.
It was a threat. So, hey, I've got an interesting question about this, Chris, that I haven't really thought about. I've talked to a lot of colleges across this beautiful state, and they've started their hemp programs. And one of the great things that Dr. DK Lee said over this summer when I stopped by the hemp summit was that, hey, students, we've got 2 lanes for you. You can either study the industrial route, which has many, many, many different applications, as we've always said in the cannabis, legalization movement. Or he said, there's this awesome route you can go down botanically if you'd like to just, study the botanical effects. So in other words, in the University of Illinois and in Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and I'm sure other colleges, that I'm forgetting right now. I know that there's different hemp clubs that have started up. I'm going to go speak with one. But I guess what I'm saying is, do you think those would be maybe allies to prevent a crackdown? I mean, our universities need access to the cannabis plant, and they've been granted that through the federal law. And people, I know they like to talk about bad actors and stuff, but what about students? Think about the implication of a crackdown like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is a great illustration of how hemp is just inherently equitable, and we don't need to have social equity carve outs because it's agriculture. I mean, another point is just as an aside, DK Lee and the whole Illinois University of Illinois at Urbana Champaign, what they're doing there is incredible. They are they are some of the cutting edge pioneers when it comes to hemp grain. They are breeding varieties of hemp that will one day exceed the protein yield per acre that soy does. Like my discussions with DK Lee and my observations in the field, I I think it's possible for hemp to compete with soy as an animal feed product if we get enough development in that field. We
And I
can
know
we
I
can
just heard
essentially,
something about like the hemp seed is like approved for, was it like chicken feed for the first time?
yeah, yeah,
Something
absolutely.
like that.
That's a great, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I wasn't going to mention that, but yeah, the market for animal feed, and like I was saying, is like we're essentially through the efforts of people like DK Lee, we will double the yields of hemp seed and protein um, per acre from cannabis, and like that's a win for hemp. This is something that's what federal legalization brings. Is the universities get involved, the land grant institutions get involved, and yeah, you the amount of advancement that you will see from university field trials is it's like light years of state level legal recreational cannabis. And going back to the state level legal recreational cannabis, um, what I was saying was, that person is saying that the hemp is hurting our social equity applicants. Who else is it hurting? Is my question. Very similar to the our problems, right? So it's like I, I don't want to come out and just say like that piece is pure propaganda because I haven't read it. But when you publish something like that, like you're responsible for the content of something like that. Like you need to at least understand what you're publishing. And when I see stuff like that out getting put out there and getting taken seriously and then getting wrapped into this and covered under this umbrella of public safety, it's really obvious what's happening, and it's you're creating a bureaucracy to collect taxes to fund the bureaucracy that collects taxes.
Yep.
And if you want to like go back to speaking about the Illinois hemp rules,
Yeah.
um, the
But
Illinois hemp rules aren't doing this, but there is legislation out there that's been proposed that is doing this, and I think we've discussed this before as well. Like Representative LaShawn Ford has been putting. This is probably his third iteration of the bill. Yeah, it's like 5306 or
yeah,
5603. I can't remember.
5306
Yeah,
and
5306.
3790.
Yeah, and that's the Senate version, right?
Hmm.
So I read this bill last night. Um, it starts on page 112 and goes to page 220. He is rewriting the entire Industrial Hemp Act with this bill, and most of these suggestions are most of these changes are geared towards the retailers, the end users, and specifically the Delta 9 and really just hemp derived Delta 9. Like they're going straight after hemp derived Delta 9. They create exceptions for full spectrum, broad spectrum, isolate, all of these things. So they're not going after anything other than the competition essentially for the state cannabis program. And what they want to do is put a 5% tax on all sales, and also all, like, they create 4 new types of licenses. They are dragging in the IDFPR. They're dragging in the Illinois Department of Public Health. They are essentially trying to circumvent the rulings of the federal government when it comes to, like, the FDA and the USDA, and what they classify hemp as, and what they approve as a lawful use of hemp. They're essentially, like, trying to usurp more authority from the government, and it's kind of a cloudy area. Like, the state has primary regulatory authority over hemp as long as they submit a plan that is approved by the USDA. So, like, the legal language, like, the problem I have with this is, like, they're trying to put it all into law, and, like, these most of this stuff, like, if you have valid suggestions, you should have the IDOA just change the rules instead of putting it into the law. And I know we've talked about that before, but this is a 220-page bill that rewrites the entire Industrial Hemp Act, and is kind of flying underneath the radar. It was introduced not too long ago, but like I said, it's the third iteration of this. All of these suggestions, you have to think about this. If you're looking at this bill, you have to think about this. How are things working now? Are they working okay for the hemp industry? Why would we change the hemp? Why would we change the rules and the law for hemp in Illinois? Like I said before, this bill, like, the purpose of this bill is to create a bureaucracy to collect taxes to fund the bureaucracy that collects taxes. It also has a 55%, so it dumps all of the 5% of the tax money from this bill, goes into the Industrial Hemp Regulatory Fund, but 55% of that goes into the Industrial Hemp Social Equity Fund. And it's like, there is no social equity problem right now in hemp. But if a bill like this passes, there probably would be, because now you're creating all these complicated barriers to entry for the hemp industry.
Right.
And so, again, cura te ipsum, right? You are the cure for your own disease. You are creating a problem, and then you're solving it so that you can be the middleman and siphon 5% off of every transaction. And if you want to talk about the amount of money that's at stake here, let's talk about the cannabis market in Illinois. $1.6 billion in 2023, right? That's what came out of this state for legal cannabis out of dispensaries. 1.6 billion. So let's say that the hemp industry is equal to that, but it's probably not, because we don't price gouge like the cannabis industry does. And so let's say it is 1.6 billion. 5% tax on 1.6 billion. That's $80 million. 15% of that goes to the IDOA. 15% of that goes to the IDFPR, 15% of that goes to the Illinois Department of Public Health, and 55% of that goes to social equity. And if you look at the language in this bill that's talking about social equity, they say, we need to do all these social equity components. We need to have, this department figure out how to give loans and how to give assistance to social equity and social justice qualified people who are interested in hemp. But at the end of that section, it says, but they can also use contractors and third parties. So we're talking about 55% of $80 million, $44 million going towards third parties and contractors who understand what cannabis equity is. So tell me, who are these people? Because that's what's going to happen. These departments don't have the capacity to enforce off of 15% of that budget. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's going to go out to contractors. So they've created this carve out in this bill to siphon tens of millions of dollars of hemp money towards whoever that third party contractor might be, who can fulfill the requirements of social equity for hemp, which is a non-existent thing. It's a massive opportunity for corruption and for waste. And the last thing that we need as an industry right now is more tax on the an industry that is just now coming online and establishing itself. People are going to see where this tax money is going, and it's going to have a chilling effect on the entire industry. And I know that that was a long rant, but I feel like that's the key takeaway for this bill, and whatever versions of this bill come out.
Thank you for addressing that. I was going to ask you, like, because I know there's these rules, but then if you couldn't tell, I had that Illinois News Joint article prepared because I had also heard there were these bills. Phil, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, just that's just totally par for the course for Illinois, right? Like
Yeah,
have bureaucracy that makes more tax money that can fund more bureaucracy and just
yeah,
cannibalize businesses in the process.
yeah. I feel like it doesn't really matter that it's hemp. Like it's just that's just kind of our par for the course. Like whatever it is, we need to over regulate and tax it. It doesn't matter what it is. We need to create the opportunity to throw tens of millions of dollars at my brother's cousin's contracting business because they know, they qualify for whatever it is we're looking for.
Yeah, I really just think this all comes down to this is the only chat. Like, I can bitch all I want on the Chillinois podcast and now on the Cole Memo about how I hate limited licenses, but this is the challenge to that system directly. And I mean, they said it clearly in the quotes that I said earlier. It's all about the idea of preventing failure of this program. You know what I mean? Like even
It's not
before. Go
it's
ahead.
not just the limited licenses that it's challenging though too. It's the amount of overregulation, right?
True.
Like
That
there are retailers who can sell hemp products and they don't have to have some 300 to $500,000 camera system that's hooked up to the Illinois State Police 24/7, and all the like operating procedures that dispensaries go through, which are all probably unnecessary. But yeah, like so it's a challenge to everything that they're doing.
absolutely the whole system. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. And I guess the way I was going to go with it, but I really appreciate you jumping in there because what you added, it is absolutely a challenge to the system in and of itself. I just so Erin, when she talked about her experience at the Canra conference, uh she said that Illinois stands in, quote, much better shape compared to many other states. To illustrate her point, she cited Michigan's cannabis market, describing it as a struggling market. She recounted hearing discussions at the conference about cannabis operators in Michigan facing receivership and enduring significant price compression due to their regulatory framework. And this isn't the first time that like somebody from the state of Illinois has kind of used Michigan as an example of a failed market. As you just said earlier, Illinois cannabis 2023 revenue was 1.6 billion. Michigan was 3 billion. And the same thing can be said about 2022. I'm not going to pull the numbers up right now. Folks, Google them yourself. It's the same story. So I don't know that it's fair to say that Michigan is a struggling market, but I guess to wrap it around to the reason I'm bringing this up is if hemp could cause something like that, right? If it is a direct competitor and it causes price compression, which is one of the things that they apparently work to prevent, if it causes price compression, it could cause receivership. And they say those are the two things that they don't want to happen, that their office works every day to prevent things like that happening. Prices falling and people going out of business, right? Because that's the government's job. Um,
I just don't think it just doesn't make any sense at all because if Michigan is taxing at the same percent as Illinois, then they're taxing nearly twice as much revenue. So the state is twice as well off. So
now,
I would call that double the success.
yeah, now that was just revenue. People will bring that up, and I can Google that really quick. But I do think Illinois does bring in actually kind of a comparable figure when it comes to tax revenue per year, because we are taxing it much higher. So sometimes they'll say, well,
Are what
that's a
are
sign of success,
well, are we taxing it higher, or are prices just triple in Illinois
True.
what they are in Michigan?
That's a good point.
So like if the percentage that you're pulling from the market is the same, but the revenues, like, yeah, I mean, a gram in Illinois is $20. It's still $20. It's insane. You can I was in Michigan, and last time I was there, I was able to get 5 1 gram cartridges of distillate for $100. That is roughly $500 worth of product in Illinois.
Right.
Uh,
Bill, you
and
want? Oh, sorry.
and
Go ahead.
I would say that the stuff from Michigan actually tasted better too.
Yeah, Phil, I was gonna give Phil the opportunity. You want to share a story?
Yeah, I mean, you can get grams of distillate for like $7.50. This is from an $80 ounce. It's the price weed should be, really. People just buy more.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can buy more, you can enjoy it more, and you can share it more. And it shows in the total revenue, because that's 3 billion in Michigan, where prices are 50% or 33% of what they are in Illinois, and they're doing double the gross. So like that means they're selling 4 to 6 times as much product in Michigan. The problem that we have with it is that it's not coming out of only 21 businesses in Illinois. Based on that's another insane thing, is like you're only allowed to have one cultivation center per police district.
Right.
And it's wide open in Michigan comparatively. And so yeah, it's struggling to see consolidation from a few MSOs. That's what it's struggling to do. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, everyone from every surrounding state around Michigan knows Michigan's the place to go.
Yeah. And I'm displaying the figures for 2022. I couldn't find them for 2023, but for 2022, or well, yeah, from fiscal year, or sorry, 445.3 million in fiscal year 2022 for Illinois, but for Michigan, 325 million. So
Yeah, so
they still
they
sold more than us. I want to be clear about that. They still did sell more weed than us. But
but they're only doing a 10%, which is it's more in Illinois. It's 10 and 6 is what it said. In
right.
Illinois, it's like 30, 25, and 20, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
depending on whatever category it is. So yeah, I mean, all the numbers add up. Like it, we don't want to be any part of it. We don't think hemp has any relation to it. Like the whole ecosystem that you've created, it's like Apple. It's like you're either a part of the ecosystem or you're not. And if you're a part of the ecosystem, like you think you're better than everybody else, I guess is the way to say it. Like you're willing to pay triple for something that does the same thing, but you're part of an exclusive club.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, any other thoughts on the rules that were presented or proposed? I guess you said they took comment. It was several months ago. Now they're just, what's the state of them?
Yeah, they published them in the register, so they'll be doing another round of public comments on
Okay.
the final proposed rule, and we will be participating in that. We don't have a ton of comments for them based on what they've changed. Like the first time they tried to change stuff, we had a lot of comments. We made some very detailed suggestions. Um, the only suggestion of ours that they took was they added language regarding microgreens. So now if you're a hemp grower and you want to grow microgreens for production and you know just sell them at a farmer's market or whatever, you don't have to get them tested, which it's a win. It's a win. It's a very minor win, but it's a win. So we'll take that. And like the that we appreciate that. And then based on seeing what they said this time around, um, we didn't have a whole lot of comments for them. We would like them to change. There's three places in the rules where we want them to change the phrase hemp to raw industrial hemp plant material, which they use elsewhere in the rules. And we want to do this because it's a clarifying thing. We as we read these rules, we think that that is their intent, but the phrasing and the usage of the word hemp versus like raw plant material seems to be a little bit misaligned. So one of our comments is we would like to see you say raw hemp plant material here instead of just plain old hemp. And then really there's not much more beyond that. The other part of it is, you know, we really would still like to see performance based sampling language included in this um, rule set, because that language is provided by the United States Department of Ag. They crafted this PBS performance based sampling system and said, you know, if there's some way that you can enable hemp to be grown to ensure that you know you're growing compliant plants without having to do the whole laboratory testing thing, then by all means please do. And they weren't very specific, and they said, you know, it's up to the state to take care of their people and to figure out how to do this reasonably and in a way that satisfies their own requirement. And so in Pennsylvania they've actually done this, so it's a really great, like there's a memorandum on the Pennsylvania Department of Ag website that explains exactly what I'm talking about. Pennsylvania did it. We made this exact comment, like literally what Pennsylvania has put into their rules. We made this exact comment almost a year ago now. It was 11 months ago. We said you need to include performance-based sampling language for just regular cultivators, and this is how you do it. And then literally Pennsylvania did it, and Illinois decided not to do it. The only thing they decided to do, again, was to add the microgreens language. So that is going to be the other part of our comment when we get the opportunity. We're going to say, please change these three little technical things, and also please reconsider including performance-based sampling language as Pennsylvania has so recently done.
Yeah. I've got a kind of a higher level question here, so I wanted to give Phil the space. Did you have any thoughts on that specifically? Gotcha. So you know, I don't mean to take us back to this, but it just seems like all of this is about is the quote intent of the law. Like everybody brings up like this was not the intent of the law. Like, and I want to like go in two ways with this. Like, first of all, none of those representatives actually wrote that bill. I would be willing to argue it's usually written by other people. You know what I mean? In the farm bill, right? I mean, just like all other bills, it's like some other organization writes it and they like get the person to introduce that language. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, it's all done by committee. Yeah. And then it's reviewed by another committee.
So, but I mean, like this whole idea of this wasn't the intent of the law. I've kind of been asking lately. I'm like, but maybe it was. Maybe like somebody just silently was at the back of the room, like, just shut the fuck up about this. They don't understand what they're regulating. I wrote the law. If they just fucking sign this into law, we're good. It's hard to put the cat back in the bag.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about this LaShawn Ford bill too. If they actually like, it's so poorly written that if they actually pass it, it will just be bedlam. But no, I think it's the opposite with the farm bill. Like they knew exactly what they were writing. The language that they use when they say like isomers and salts of isomers, like, they were talking to a chemist. They were talking to drug people. They were talking to the DA. And to think that their intention was anything other than what is like currently happening, and like, everyone says it's a loophole, it's a gray area, it's this, that. It's like, just look around you, at what's happening right now. That is the intent. If you think it's not the intent, you're deluding yourself. You think that the government is doing something or isn't doing something that they should be doing, when they're not doing it because they've decided that that's the best way to do it. Like, people would be in jail right now over all this Delta 9 hemp and all this THCA stuff, but they're not.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's kind of similar to like, it's people think it's like a weird thing to have this like cannabis market and this hemp market. But I keep hearing people compare it to like the taxi market and Uber,
Yes.
in terms of regulations and licensing and uh oligopolies and stuff like that. And what was the other one I was going to say? It's like, well, come back to that.
Okay. Yeah. If you think of it, let me know. I was just gonna ask, have you ever thought about just dropping the intoxicating compounds and just like focusing, like, or is that like, because I'll just stop and ask you that question, because that seems to be the issue at hand. They literally said it. They're like, you can have, whatever, it just can't be intoxicating,
I think
quote unquote.
there's definitely two camps in the hemp industry, and the National Hemp Association is very much in the camp that, anything that produces cannabinoids should just be separate. Like, if the intent of the crop is to produce cannabinoids, it should be regulated as cannabis, and leave us, row croppers, our fiber and grain people, leave us alone. Like, let us do our agricultural thing. We have no interest in extracting. And I there's a big appeal to that. It opens up the floodgates for big ag to get involved, which is a blessing and it's a curse. But it will accelerate the adoption, of hemp as like a major crop. Um, but why would we ignore the opportunity that we have here, with hemp, to not just be a, food and fiber crop, but to also provide us with useful chemical compounds, to provide us with a new way of, uh, creating like a bio-based economy around, not, uh, compounds that are beneficial for human health, and can help, uh, alleviate symptoms and treat, uh, chronic illness, in various ways. If we as we continue to study these compounds, like, there's so many benefits. Like, why would we create these separate streams? Like, why do we have to have this division? We I think we just need to step away, like, as the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. Like, we're we have a bias towards the row cropping, the ag world, because we're an ag organization. Like, we support farmers first and foremost. But over the years of it being, exposed to this cannabinoid market, and all the people that are involved in this cannabinoid market, like, this is part of the world of ag now. Like, we can't you like you said, the cat's out of the bag. Like, this to have this amount of revenue coming off an acre, I think is kind of, it's like, it's mind blowing. Like, we don't know what to do with it yet, and people are trying to slow it down. Um, it's I mean, I don't want, like, it's not like a direct comparison, but it's kind of like what's happening with AI right now. Like people can't comprehend the changes that are going to happen when this thing becomes more mainstream and more adopted 10 years down the road. But ultimately, it's going to lead to uh, some pain, but mostly benefit. And that's I guess why we continue to operate the IHCA is we see that we can see that's what the future holds for hemp, and whatever means we need to employ to get there, that is ethical and responsible, that's what we'll do. And so we don't think that hemp cannabinoid products are unethical, or that they're a loophole. We think that it's all part of the intention of developing this crop, and why wouldn't it be?
Yeah. Phil, I wanted to play that clip you referenced a second ago, and maybe it'll jog your memory if you know.
Oh, well, I was just going to say the other comparison you can make to like this hemp market and cannabis market is at the end of Prohibition, they allowed for like low potency beer first. So it's, it's like this farm bill has almost done that in states like Texas or,
Yeah.
uh, you know, Mississippi, any other of these really conservative states that don't have any kind of cannabis market. So it's like loosening the ground.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Definitely check that out, folks. I'm not super familiar with all the details, but that's, yeah, super cool, and I've heard of that as well. So wanted to play that clip that Phil was referencing. It's from a grown-in panel on hemp-derived products.
Something that everybody should consider. Uh, to everyone's point, yeah, I mean the MSOs and the folks that went into the marijuana side, there's a lot of high upfront costs and there's a lot of challenges of like how do we appeal, now there becomes protectionism of an oligopoly because you've got a lot of investor monies that are waiting for a return. And we certainly sympathize that, but we think of the hemp industry as kind of like Uber coming into a taxi cab city where, taxi cabs are a high oligopoly with barriers to entry and some would argue a, pretty substandard level of service. Uber comes in unregulated with a new business model that is in a regulatory gray area that captures the hearts and minds of the consumer, and then the regulations kind of get back ended into that industry. And so we see that kind of happening on the hemp side. In terms of
Thought that was just a good analogy. Never really thought of it that way, So
Yeah, I love the comparison, and I think the scale is correct. But I still disagree with the whole gray area loophole terminology that we're
right.
using here. But yeah, exactly. I think and right, like you're going to continue to see efforts, backdoor or back end efforts to regulate hemp after the fact. But I think we should, as the state has already proven that they're a failure to regulate cannabis. They should step back and let the federal government do, the slow progress of the federal government will lead to a unified market for cannabis in general, for cannabis and hemp across the U.S. States can't do this, they, especially after all the history we have. Like states are, it's like it's just reefer madness 2.0. Is and there's many ways to just express that. I feel like if you think that cannabis needs to be that heavily regulated, you're still participating in this sort of, it's a danger, and anyone who's had any experience with it knows that it's not really the case. It's only dangerous when big money is involved.
Yeah. And I want to bring this to close with I thought this was another small just snippet that really embodies what hemp is, like for people. So
And multi-millions of dollars usually come from the usual suspects. One can get into the hemp. This is the true American pathway to normalization and legalization, and that these are mom and pop opportunities that present themselves on the hemp side as opposed to corporate entities on the marijuana side.
so I thought that was a really interesting question. Although, you know, that's kind of the problem, right? That is kind of the problem. um, and if I could, but Chris, before I get into that, um,
Oh,
yeah.
I just realized I was muted, but I was going to say, except for all the multi-million dollar companies getting into the hemp business.
Oh, true. Yeah, true. Good point there. Good point. Well, this will actually, I'll play my own question that I asked Chris, and maybe you can answer it. We've kind of already touched on it, but again, that whole quote of the true American pathway, I believe that's accurate. But also I believe that's
just with
part of
more
the problem.
quality, right?
So you're going to see a familiar face. My question might be a little bit too Illinois specific, but after thinking, it might apply to all others, and it was kind of touched on in this discussion. It seems like there's a consensus that that issue with high schoolers and that type of stuff is not what we want as people trying to be responsible in the space. And as somebody, I think it was Jennifer maybe pointed out earlier, many hemp operators came together in Illinois to agree that we should be taxed, we should be tested, we should be labeled if we're going. I'll stop for the record really quick. Obviously, Chris, you voiced that maybe you weren't a part of that. Ideally, I think you would have agreed to all of those things except for maybe the taxing part of it. Um, but I just allow me to finish the question really quick. I just wanted to say that for the record because I just brought that back up. So I'm going to be selling intoxicating cannabinoids, and I hosted a debate around this subject, and it seemed to shift from that health concern to a debate around limited licensing and open licensing, and the things that Chris was saying earlier about it being the true American pathway to legalization with no barriers to entry is seen as something that would dilute the market. So again, not to get too Illinois specific, but I'll just stop it there because we've kind of already touched these bases. It's I don't I think the reason I just keep going on about it is because it's just so mind-numbingly frustrating, that this is really where we're standing right now, and that, like, again, just to go back to one of those quotes that said local law enforcement is reluctant to do anything when people have hemp. I've been asking, like, isn't that a win? I thought we wanted cops to leave people alone in the context of cannabis possession and use, So isn't that a win? Like you're saying, the way it was said was as if it was a bad thing, you know. Um, so
Exactly, and and what I didn't mention earlier was in that bill that's proposed. It creates the opportunity to charge minors with felonies for possession of hemp.
the bill we were just discussing by LaShawn Ford
Yes, that's correct.
wasn't one of the main features of the CRTA is that it did remove criminalization for kids. I mean, it wasn't just a slap on the wrist, but it was like, hey, kind of in parity with alcohol. At least that's how I understood it to be.
Yeah, in that bill, he references Section 4 of the Cannabis Control Act. And if you look at the penalties in Section 4, it includes felonies for possession of over 100 grams. So,
No matter what
you,
age you are. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, we just
yeah.
had a medical.
So,
No, apparently, even if you have a medical card, you can get charged with that. So, you know.
yeah. So but what it's doing is doing that, but for hemp, which is federally legal. There's no limit on what you can
Yeah.
possess.
Wait, so we're
So
adding a possession limit for
so
hemp?
yeah, recriminalizing cannabis.
Yes, and also if this incident happens to occur while you're operating a motor vehicle, you also lose your license if you're a minor.
Right.
So this is the problem with bills that are 220 pages long. Um, the law should be very simple. It should just direct the department to do what it needs to do to make it work. It shouldn't have 300 pages of complexity that can put your kid in jail and charge them with a felony at age 19 and pull their driver's license for having a couple ounces of hemp in the trunk or whatever.
Yeah. Do you think it's, if I could just like, do you think that it is, so for example, JB Pritzker had his State of the State today. He had a graphic, and one of his accomplishments was launching the adult use cannabis industry. Obviously, he likes to talk about that a lot. Do you think that conceding, is it the concession of the system itself that's the issue? Like, would that be seen? Because he wants to put it on his belt. You know, he might even run for president. I hear. Obviously, we don't know, but like, what? I just don't understand the rigidity to the dumb system that was created. You know, like, why are we trying so hard to protect it? Um,
I think it's an incredible achievement for tax revenue and for a select group of highly funded business owners. It's an incredible achievement to deliver such a protected market to um, your large corporations. Like it is, but J JB is an heir to a large corporation, so like it it's like growing up as the Prince of England and not knowing that like not everybody's as rich as you. Like for him to say it's one of his achievements, it absolutely is. He's delivered for the the corporate managerial class that seems to think they're entitled to all of the profits from cannabis.
Phil, thoughts on that? Amen.
Well, just that I think like the legislators kind of got like rolled over by the lobbyists for these big companies, and they passed a law that was so lopsided in the favor of those companies that like I mean they don't really have much incentive to change it, but like the regulators and all these people who are just in charge with enforcing it, like what the fuck else are they supposed to say?
Right.
Like
It's their
they just
job.
keep like toeing the line. Like if they don't toe the line, they don't stay around long. Like look at Danielle Perry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we miss her. We liked her a lot. We saw her at NECAN, and we really loved what she was doing, but she didn't last more than about a year.
Well, she did dare to hypothesize that social equity might mean adding more licenses or removing caps entirely. And I don't know if that was exactly what got her job taken away, but it might have been like on the list.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, yeah, I also miss Danielle Perry. I just have to always add, like, for posterity. This is how cool she was. They had this, the state of Illinois still has this post up. Who is the CROO? Tune into the Chillinois podcast. Hopefully we can make something like that happen again. That'd be real cool. Um, so
Yeah, Cole, you are you're the foremost voice in discussion around cannabis in the state. I feel like if not beyond the state, like there's no one that consistently and steadily creates content like you.
thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, it's a, I don't know, it's fun. I like talking about it. So, but I want to thank you all for always being willing to talk to me at length on these subjects, Phil and Chris. I think it's like important to really flesh these things out at length because there is a lot to this, and um, yeah, I think people just hear the sound bites about those stories that we referenced, the the children with the Delta 8, and they just think, well, let's make it illegal. And it's like, we have to learn from the mistakes of the past that, the criminal law is not ever the answer. It's funny. I almost said not always the answer. It's not ever the answer, really, in regard to like simple possession or cultivation of, cannabis, drugs. I'll even go that far. I don't know if everybody agrees with me on that one, but yeah. So
Most drugs, we'll say.
yeah. Yeah.
Some pretty wacky drugs out there.
Yeah, there are some crazy ones. Chris, well, Phil, anything before I give Chris the last word? Any like
No,
questions that come up or anything? No.
Thanks for another good talk.
Yeah, I guess I do have just like one last question, Phil. I think you'll like this one. It's a quick one, I think, Chris. Am I just like allowed to grow hemp?
I was wondering this too. I tried to look it up at one point. I thought you had to be like on an agricultural lot or something like that.
Yeah, so that's true. You have to be licensed to grow hemp legally, and in order to get a license approved by the department, this is what they're adding into the requirements is the FSA. So you have to go to your FSA and say, I want to grow hemp, and then they'll look at the property that you have and say it's not possible for you to grow hemp there because you're not a farm. That's the piece there that before it's the language was still there, the language of I-60, Illinois like property tax, or just Illinois tax code I-60. I can't remember what exactly the phrase is there, but I-60, and it says like you need to be classified as a farm to grow hemp. And when I kind of dug into it, it's like you don't really need to be zoned agricultural. Like the classification of a farm according to the USDA is any property that's used to generate $1,000 worth of produce every year. And it's not necessarily that you actually even have to have the revenue of $1,000 of produce every year. It's just that you have to have the plan to produce $1,000 of produce every year. So like I know I'm getting like way into
Yeah.
the weeds on this,
I was like, I
but
thought this was an
basically
easy
like
question.
they never is with hemp. It never is. But but I'll try to make it quick.
It's
But
okay.
so
No, it's okay.
what I would say is if you want to grow, go to your FSA and talk to them first before you go and talk to the department, because for the department, what they want is for you to submit $100 application fee, and then you might find out that you're not allowed to grow.
Mm.
Whereas if you go to your local FSA, everyone's got one in their county. Go to your local FSA and say, I want to grow hemp, and then talk to them. It's free. That's their job. So yeah, it sucks to have to deal with another department, another organization when it comes to you just wanting to grow some hemp. But it's their job to help you. It's their job to make sure that if you're sending in $100 for an application fee, that you're not just wasting your money.
Mm.
And the other part of that is maybe your FSA doesn't know, and they'll say reach out to your local township or look for your local ordinance. If in your local ordinance, if you go reach out to your city council or whatever, and they say, yeah, we don't have any, you're on a half-acre lot, yeah, you're not a farm, but if you want to grow a quarter acre of hemp, whatever, your backyard's fenced off, just do what you got to do, and it may still all work for you. But the minimum indoor size is still 500 square foot. The minimum outdoor size is still a quarter acre. So it comes down to your local, and then it comes down to your local government and your local FSA. If you can get, they're just regular people. If you can get those regular people on board, because you're like, hey, I'm not, this isn't a meth lab. This is me wanting to just grow some plants. Then you have a great shot. And if all your ducks in a row, and then you go to apply for a license with the IDOA, then you're gonna get it. So you can't just grow, you got to be licensed. And yeah, there's a little bit of backstory there, but you can always reach out to us the IHGA, IllinoisHGA.com. Give us a call or send us an email or post on our forum, or there's many ways for you to get a hold of us, and we can help you navigate, in a personalized way.
Cool. IllinoisHGA.com, and maybe next time we can get into the backstory behind that, because that sounds like somebody like me probably caused trouble and now there's that rule or something like that. So
Yeah, they call it the coal clause.
yeah, yeah. They're always coming up with something. Well, Phil, did you have any thoughts? I wanted to give you some space before we close.
I think you have some homework of introducing yourself to your local FSA and finding out if you can grow hemp in your backyard.
Yep, yep. Gotta figure that out. That's right. That's right. Chris, I wanted to give you the space because I asked you that last question. Anything that we didn't talk about or anything that you wanted to mention in closing?
No, just a quick reminder that we have an event March 27th in Springfield. So please join us and be on the lookout for our hemp lobby day coming up in May of this year.
Absolutely, folks. Absolutely. You can follow them on social media, Illinois HGA. Once again, IllinoisHGA.com. I'm displaying the graphic for the event March 27th. That's the after party. Starts at 3 p.m. that same day. As Chris said, there's the Illinois Hemp Summit 2024. And yeah. All right. Well, Phil, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I had a great time with you, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation that we have. I always enjoy our conversations. So,
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you both.
Yeah, good
absolutely.
to talk again.
All right, audience. I hope you enjoyed this one. Take care.